Welcome to VB in Conversation. I am joined by Vijoy, Pandey, SVP of Outshift, and Reynold, co-founder of Databricks. Welcome to both of you. Today we're going to be talking about responsible AI and how enterprises can effectively navigate the complexity of integrating Gen AI products and tools into their existing workflows to drive innovation.
To me, there's maybe four different sort of important parts that are kind of intertwined. One is culture, the other one is talent, and then process and the systems in place. I think culturally, this is actually the opportunity you want to be able to embrace things and really bring up the innovative culture, which is related to the talent you require. You will want to attract talent that are more willing to go from 0 to 1, because this is a 0 to 1 stage. So I think this is actually the type you want to focus a little bit more on, the 0 to 1. Nobody has 5+ years of experience in Gen AI and how to apply Gen AI applications. So this really needs to be complemented by a lot of bottom-up innovations.
Reynold, this is a follow-up question. You touched on this just a little bit, but what strategies should enterprises employ to identify and prioritize the most suitable use cases for scaling up generative AI applications?
So if you think about all the different use cases, plot it onto maybe the map, and there's two axes to the map. One axis is what's the cost of getting it wrong? So some decisions or some sort of product design, if you're wrong, it's disastrous. Like, for example, hey, how much maybe morphine I'm injecting into the human's body? That is something you do not want to get wrong. But for example, generating the chart in a specific way is totally okay if it's wrong, because the recipient would have a lot of judgment on, hey, should I trust the chart or not? So that's one important axis. Another important axis is, can I validate whether it's wrong or not? Basically, can I validate the effectiveness of the Gen AI applications and the LM applications? So if you plot this you plot all your different applications into this two axes, you want to focus and start with the ones that the cost of getting it wrong is low. So you can be more risk tolerant. And then you can actually validate, or easier to validate, whether it's right or wrong. So you can monitor the progress over time. And I think if you start with those, you have a much higher chance of becoming successful.
I'd love to get some examples of successful use cases from both of you, starting with Vijoy. Could you share, any examples of successful use cases where generative AI has been scaled up to make significant impact on an enterprise's operation in terms of competitive differentiation?
What you should do as an organization is concentrate on what your differentiation is, what your moat is, and maybe it's the data assets that you might be sitting on that bring differentiated experiences for your customer, and just concentrate on solving those applications or those use cases which bring those differentiated use cases to your customers. But don't try and solve the entirety of the stack. We have been looking at use cases both in the productivity as well as in the product bucket. And if you think about productivity, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you use generative AI to bump up productivity in all kinds of things that a business does day to day? So for example, we do use generative AI to generate code. So in software development, absolutely, that's a big place to go. We use generative AI for recruitment. So looking at resumes, summarization of resumes, sending out emails to potentials. There is an assistant for the enterprise. I mean, that's another great use case where imagine searching for things within the enterprise using classical search mechanisms versus generative AI mechanisms. I mean, it's a night and day difference. We're looking at how we can build security assistants that help figure out what the security problems could be and how can you remediate those problems.
We're constantly rolling out new features all the time. So sometimes the support team is actually having trouble keeping up with all the new things that are being rolled out. One of our engineer, Quinn, actually built this thing called a QuinnBot at Databricks. And what it does is it looks up all the latest release notes, look at all the design docs, and then you can ask questions. With the QuinnBot, and QuinnBot will tell you, hey, here's how this thing works. It's not 100% accurate. It's not meant to interface directly with the external users, but it provides a great way for the support staff to actually get up to speed on what's going on with the product. And often you can find things that nobody else even know about. One particular thing we recently rolled out as part of our products, more external facing, is that we have noticed in the past, so data discovery is a big problem for a data platform. Every company, every organization have millions of tables and data sets. They have no idea what they are. They have no idea how to find them, most people. So there's a lot of, hey, Slack messages and emails asking, hey, I want to find, for example, the revenue for X. Where should I even look it up? And one of the main challenges here is all this data sets doesn't have descriptions. So we basically build an LLM-based application that look at the existing workloads and try to infer what all of these tables and columns are sort of offering, and then automatically create the textual description for it. And that gets fed into a search engine. So now people can actually search and find so the relevant data sets for so what they need. And this is incredibly popular.
Reynold, kind of bouncing off that point, what do you think some of the key factors that contribute to the success of generative AI projects when scaling up, including aspects like data quality, algorithm robustness, and ongoing maintenance are?
For example, if you just want somebody to write an email for you, you don't need to worry about data right now. You can just use ChatGPT or various forms of other LLMs. But when you're building maybe products based on Gen AI, I think it's incredibly important to view it holistically as a data and apply machine learning problem. And for it to improve, you kind of need to know how well it's doing. And for any sort of improvement you deploy, you also need to know, hey, is it actually doing better or is it doing worse? And then the other thing, which is very important in the traditional applied machine learning, is the data part, which is, do you have the right data? Are you getting the monitoring of your data into the right place? Are you getting the right input? Are they clean? So this is a very important data engineering problem. I think the ones that can be successful view it holistically across the board.
Vijoy, would you agree with that? And would you be able to identify any key factors that contribute to the success of generative AI projects when scaling up, with respect to aspects like data quality, algorithm robustness, and ongoing maintenance?
The use cases are now pervasive across an organization. And what that is doing is actually a forcing function to what Reynold just said, is a forcing function for all of us to look at where our data sits, whether it's clean, whether it's normalized, whether it can talk to each other, whether it's categorized well. Do we have a data architecture? Do we want to go to a mesh? It's like all of those questions which we were pretty much punting because there was no need to just think about it holistically. Now it's like we have to think about them holistically. So
yeah, they become the very fundamental pillars of the Gen AI applications.
That's right. And so it's a forcing function, which is a good thing. Well, I think what this is going to do is it's just going to pivot all of us towards like a 10x improvement in everything that we do.
Vijoy, my next question for you is, how can enterprises ensure the long-term relevance and compliance of their scaled generative AI applications with relevant regulations and standards? These things are rapidly evolving. So what would be your advice to some of these enterprises?
Building out an abstraction layer that says, let me abstract myself from the complexity of that transition or the rapid evolution that's going to happen in this space. That's step number one. Because if you don't build that abstraction layer, you will not be relevant in the long term. Once you do that, then there are other aspects that you can plug in. So you can plug in things like compliance to the evolving regulatory space, right? And the regulatory space is going to be very different based on the region and the country you're in, for the US, for the EU, for China, India.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's a very challenging problem because models fundamentally create a whole new level of sort of challenge with respect to privacy and data. But one thing that would be very helpful, I think, is to pick, you're designing your platform, your underlying sort of data and AI platform technologies, to actually pick the ones that will give you the capability that you can at least govern them together. And you can at least have the lineage and the provenance of tracing back models back to the data they trained on. So should you need to act, you would have ways of acting.
Let me add one more thing there. I mean, I think data scientists, developers, security, IT, like line of business, all of these teams actually need to come together. So to your question around relevance, Michael, and compliance, both of those, I would say all of these teams need to come together, because without all of these personas coming together, this is going to be a hard problem for one team to solve.
While some amount of regulation is absolutely required, overly regulated it will stifle innovation. It's basically becoming very top down, but at a much more global level. As a result, only the organization that can afford to spend the largest amount of money to become compliant to overly stringent regulation will be able to sort of innovate. And that actually is the best way to stifle innovation. So this is less about maybe not directly answer your question, but talk about a slightly different aspect of it.
My final question for you, starting with Reynold, what considerations should organizations keep in mind when deciding whether to leverage off-the-shelf solutions or develop custom applications to suit their specific needs?
Yeah, so here's a pattern I've seen over and over again, which is it's always easier to start with off-the-shelf. So you want to be able to validate the idea quickly. You want to sort of find, hey, do I have maybe product market fit for the specific thing I'm doing? But once you need to deploy it at scale, now the problem of cost and privacy and data security come up. And then you might realize, hey, complete off-the-shelf solutions are way too expensive because they are foundational models, they're overly large. So a very common pattern we've seen with organizations, they start prototyping with complete off-the-shelf technologies, and they become more and more bespoke and custom depending on the optimization criteria they have. So I don't think the future would be, hey, it's only off-the-shelf models as complete build, or it's only, hey, off-the-shelf models are not as good. They're much more costly as a result. Everybody go with custom. I think this pattern of getting started with something that's fairly easy and then do more and more bespoke sort of customizations as you go on, as you scale, will be a fairly common pattern.
I think at some point, organizations settle into the right place, or the Goldilocks zone, I guess. It was okay for me to start out because I wanted to see how I customize this whole thing. But let me farm that out and let me just focus on what I would consider the top of my stack, right? And things like security and scale and I would say responsible AI and things like that for most organizations, depending upon where you're playing in the space, will actually get farmed out to vendors that actually can provide that at scale to you.
That concludes our VB conversation. I'd like to thank Vijoy Pandey, SVP of Outshift, and Reynold Shin, co-founder of Databricks. Thank you both for joining us. And thank you for watching. For more stories about the tech revolution, subscribe to our newsletter and check out other VB and conversation videos at VentureBeat.com.